Yeah, as you know, today we're going to be talking about the authentic self. So I kind of
Hmm.
wanted to like really dive into this subject because I think it's important. Out there, we hear all the time people talking about be you, stay real, just be yourself. Specifically, is one of that we hear a lot. But we
Yeah.
like that's not descriptive enough, in my opinion. I feel like that could be confusing.
Hmm.
So I feel like this conversation is really important as we really dive into what does it mean to be your true authentic self. I've always
Yeah.
been really captivated by that topic for like ever since I was in college. I've always wanted to learn more about that. So I wanted to
Yeah.
get your take on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And it's funny, I was thinking about it yesterday, like how many different ways like we could take this conversation, right? Because like what you're pointing out, this is a very, I would say, complicated thing to try to conceptualize, right? So number one, to me, it's like the first step is trying to first discover like who you even are, and then
Mm,
in order to be able to live and be your authentic self, right? To me, a lot of us are stuck on that first part. We're trying to
mm,
figure out who we are in the first place, and some of us maybe we spend a lot of time getting shaped in one certain way as we're growing up, and so we kind of see life in one way. But then over time, of course, like we evolve, we grow, you take in new information, you meet new people,
mm,
and you start to change. And maybe sometimes we're uncomfortable with what that change might look like, oh, you
mm,
used to be like this and now it seems like you're moving over here. So I think it's also like this space of allowing people to grow into who they are, allowing people to make mistakes because that's a part of how we evolve. And then I think at some point we're also going to end up touching on, because this is a big thing I was thinking about yesterday. For those of us that are in the LGBTQ plus community and trying to understand acceptance as a part of being who you really are and navigating how challenging that is if you're not in that community. I am not in that community, but trying to understand more about it, because it's very complicated. Many of us come from times where like that wasn't as open or as understood. And so that's one of those things I'm very much still trying to absorb and understand,
mm.
but there's still a lot of questions that I have also.
I love that. I love that, and I think starting this conversation with acceptance, I think that's key. I think that's really
Yeah.
important. Really getting to just kind of honestly keeping it real with yourself and embracing who you are right now. It's crucial and it's really important.
Yeah.
So many of us get caught up about the things that we don't have, the things that we are not, that we sometimes miss the chance to be grateful for who we are right now,
Hmm.
for this magical body, this person that we have been, the journey that we have actually gone through, and really finding that gratitude within that in and of itself. I'm glad that you bring up acceptance because I do feel like in our society that there's a lot of that missing. There's a
Yeah. Oh,
lot
yeah.
of acceptance that's not happening, especially in black and brown men. There's a lot of when I get there, this, when I do this, that, rather than actually taking it in and kind of just, and acceptance is not just like giving up and be like, oh, it's just who I am. I'm gonna be skinny or overweight or
Right.
my hair is gonna look crazy or whatever it might be. It's really not about that. It's really just about, hey, like, you have curly hair, embrace it. Like, really just
Hmm.
embrace who that is. Like, find um find a way to be grateful for it. And most of the time, it's pretty easy to find something to be grateful for, especially when we're talking about ourselves.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
so, in regards to acceptance, though, what would you say would be a good first step for someone who's having a hard time accepting where they are or how they look like or even their journey? Like, what is something that you
Yeah.
probably you think would be helpful for them?
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. And I think, to anybody that watches this, I think I'm probably going to say this a lot of times because I just want it to be very understood. Like acceptance in and of itself is a really, really hard thing to do. And then when you're talking about yourself, when you're talking about others and the way that they see the world or the way that they present to the world,
Mm,
understand that it is very complicated. That's why I brought up the previous example. And I'm going to try to say this a lot of times, because I don't want people to think like, oh, because you're accepting means that you understand everything or it means that you are validating everything in agreement. And I'm like, no, not necessarily. I'm trying to learn, right? That to me is very important. So let me, on the terms of acceptance, let's talk about challenges, right? Before we go directly into that.
I
So
like
what's challenging things that we may go through in trying to accept ourselves? Let's bring up some examples that me and Carlos have discussed. Because I think this is going to be, I think we're going to end up doing a lot of storytelling. I can foresee today.
I love it. I love it.
You brought up hair, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll start with hair. I'll use myself, right?
Go,
I grew up very traditional. My hair was always very short. My father was in the military, so he was very particular on having very low cut hair. So I had mine probably at, like, for those that go to barbershop, at like a 1, maybe a 2 sometimes, but it's very, very low, right? So I had that for a majority of my life. So then when I did decide to try to grow my hair out, I didn't necessarily feel as confident as you could imagine, because I hadn't had a lot of experience doing it. So it was a bit uncomfortable. So accepting things that you cannot control, accepting who you are. Skin complexion. This is obviously something that as a society and as a global society, we still have difficulty with today, right? It's still, you know, and that's on a global scale. Then we can talk about culture within the Black and the Latino community. We got to talk about colorism, which is within that, with the idea that light skin is better than darker skin. So then there's challenges within that, right? So we have to understand how to navigate that. And then obviously being a man versus a woman, there's obviously differences in terms of those different gender roles. So we can go in so many different directions, right? So it's very complicated. The whole point I'm trying to make here is it's very nuanced, right? And trying to discover who you are. But back to that point. To me, the foundation, like most things, starts with our upbringing, the morals, the values, sort of the guidelines that we experience when we're young, right? So, for example, I don't want to speak for you, Carlos, but let me give an example. So, on both sides of my family, they were pretty devoutly religious in terms of following Christianity.
Gotcha.
Let me ask you, what is your experience like when you were growing up with your family? How was that in terms of spirituality? Were they devoutly in their faith? Did they go to church often? What was that like for you guys?
So it was really interesting because my grandparents, all of them were very much very devout Christians as well. I got lucky with my mom. She is religious and spiritual. She wasn't really much of a church person. She gave us the option to go to church if we wanted to, and I ended up going on my own. Like I just found a place that I enjoyed. But she never really like forced us to do anything. She embraced us in whatever way we wanted to follow. My dad was a little bit more close-minded, as you can imagine. He wasn't really as like, okay, just believe what you think serves you, what you think it's more in alignment with you. But my mom, I remember seeing all of my friends like going and getting baptized and doing all that stuff. And having a conversation with my mom, I was like, hey, like, why am I not? And she would literally tell us, like, hey, it's up to you. Like, if you want to do it, like, I want to make sure that's your decision. I don't want to like shove that down your throat, because I don't think that's smart. So I was lucky in that way. But most of the people that I was surrounded by, it was like, okay, this is what we do. We go to church every single Sunday. So for me, I have a very interesting upbringing for sure in that way when it comes to the religious aspect. But I still did spend a lot of time in church. There's a lot of religion within my family in and of itself. Like greetings involve the word like the God, for example, and like I think whenever I'm meeting some of my relatives, I'm like, hey, like blessings, uncle, like bendición, uncle, and they say God bless you. And that's just how it is every time. Right. So I was very much, it was very much instilled in me, but luckily it wasn't like pushed down my throat, in my opinion. So
sure.
Good. So I definitely think, like other people go about it differently.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. You know, like we all have these different things that we're exposed to. So like early on in life, that may shape who you are. Me and my older sister, we spent a lot of time in church because that's like what our mom wanted us to do. So we went to the same church that she went to, but then when we were with my dad's family, we also went to the churches that they went to. So we spent a lot of time there. And so what I mean is that like that shapes your worldview, you know, for a period of time. So I might see the world from like a religious perspective, from a Christian perspective, in terms of how people should treat each other, how they should behave, how I should behave, right? But then you start to grow and you start to evolve, and then maybe different thoughts into your mind, and you start to challenge what you were taught, right?
Yep.
And so like, right. So, and so again, my point is there's a lot of nuance there, because I'm going to be changing. So what I was accustomed to, what I was used to, what was normal to me is now maybe not so much, because now maybe I don't subscribe to it in the way that I did previously. So this journey, which I do underline, to self-discovery takes time. I will say I'm not this really, really old guy, but I will say, since I did make it through my 20s already, I personally think that it takes about your entire 20s to figure out who you are. Truly. That's my thought. I'm not saying it's the right way to think about it. That's just my experience. To feel comfortable and confident who you are, I think it takes almost your entire 20s to figure that out. And then I think in your 30s and beyond, it's like, how do I actualize it? How do I take the things that I believe I value, I appreciate, I support? How do I now mobilize and actualize on those concepts? So it's understanding that this will take time for you, but the more open-minded you are to accepting new information, to giving room to change your positions, to evolve, to make mistakes, which again, we are all going to, we're all going to make different mistakes, being open to that. And then one little point out on there, if we as a society, perhaps, cannot demonize people when they make mistakes, I think we as individuals will move forward a lot faster. Because I think a lot of people in these type of public platforms, I think, and in general, I think we're very afraid to be honest.
Right.
You know, I think we're very, very hesitant, because we're like, if I say this, then I might get this response. So maybe I shouldn't live my truth. Maybe I shouldn't be me, as you said in the beginning. So that kind of stuff makes me a bit more hesitant when it comes to that. So to emphasize that point once again, it's going to take time for us to figure out who we are, to come to acceptance. Once we even do that, we might be hesitant to even share some of the things that we are going through, or that we do feel are more congruent with who we are, because we're worried the world's going to judge us or make fun of us or make us feel bad because of who we are. And so I'm hoping that we can promote that type of dialogue and understanding, while also understanding that the world isn't necessarily setting us up for that level of progress. It's at times there's a bit of friction when you're trying to evolve and when you're trying to grow.
Definitely. I feel like even it'd be fair to say that when we do try to be your true authentic self, you might face some backlash when it comes to conforming, because you're not, you might not even fit under the standards of whatever society thinks that your kind of people do. So you can get some backlash regarding many different things. Like, for example, I will consider myself spiritual now, but for a time I consider myself not an atheist. When I first told my family about that, it was not. I
imagine that didn't go well.
That did not go well, and it was who I saw myself at the time. Like, from the information that I gathered, that's what made sense to me at the time. I see things differently now, of course, but I definitely noticed how difficult it was for me to even bring up some of the conversations, or even like truly just speak my mind about how I saw things, which made it even harder for me to really dive into those topics, because I would be receiving a lot of attacks, and then in turn I would get defensive, and I would just go to a war that nobody could win. And rather than actually opening up that conversation about, like, hey, this is how I see the world right now, as a 18, 19-year-old college student who thinks they know everything about the world. And like, you know, I was really confident. I was like, yeah, this works. But overall, like, because of the response that I was getting, I was never really able to have those conversations and really understand where they were coming from. And they weren't also able to understand where I was coming from. So I like really embracing where you are right now. Like, I think that's such a good point, because we change as people. We change. We're really embracing the here and now of our bodies or our minds. It's really important. It's really important. of course, there's two things we could do. We could if there's a way we could change it, we could do something about it, or we could just let it be. We do have those options. But for the most part, we first have had to agree on where we are now. And I think that's where acceptance like really comes in and allows us to really embrace our true selves. And that that word comes back again. Like, what's the true self, right? Like, what does that mean? I found personally, from my personal experience, that one of the best ways to find out who the true self is asking yourself. It's really asking yourself, because nobody else can tell you. For real. Like, there's other people might have some ideas or go based off the behavior that they've observed, but I feel like one of the best ways to really figure out who you are is to really sit down with yourself and asking yourself, okay, who am I? Like, what are the things that what I do? What are the things that I think about? What are the things that I want? And really just and being truly honest with yourself and having the mentality that, hey, if I'm writing this down, I'm not sharing this with anyone. This is truly for me. And after you do, you're like, oh, like you become really comfortable with it. It's just words, and it's yourself, so you can embrace it. But that acceptance, I feel like after you start accepting who you are, I think the next steps is really gaining that clarity on who you are. And I think that I would like to bring up values with you and see how that shapes your perception of the authentic self. For me, whenever I see someone who's having a hard time kind of figuring out who they are, where they want to go, what they want to be, and anything like that, I usually one of my main questions to ask is like, what are your values? What are the things that you value? And I've noticed that a lot of people, especially people in their 20s, they're not really asking themselves that question. That's not something that they're really taking the time to do that inner work and sit down and like, really, okay, so I value the environment, I value honesty, I value friendship, I value leadership, whatever it might be. I have a massive list personally. And it changes all the time. Just want to run further. It changes all the time.
Which is fair.
Yeah, and that's okay. But in your perspective and in your experience, how has values been a part of really uncovering the true self and the authentic self?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, I can tell you for me, at the top of my list, and I think it'll always be at the top of my list, is I value great communication. That's not only as a therapist, as a father, as somebody who wants, to be married one day. I think about all these different intricate ways that if you have great communication, it's so much easier to, for me, number one, build good relationships with people. A very extremely important thing I think most people would like, being understood by others. I think that's why we communicate in the first place. And then understanding people at the same time. I think it allows us to live the type of life truly that we want for our future. So for me, one thing I will kind of bring up too, when I think about a lot of family building, when I think about parenting, when I think about the parent-child dynamic, to me, a foundation of that is allowing, for example, your child to be who they really are. But in order to do that, I as a parent have to give them the space to breathe and to go on their own journey discovering who they are, not minimizing and shutting them down as they're maybe bumping their head or as they're starting to make some discovery, right? So that's one bucket. Relationships. If I don't know who I am and what I want and what I value, and then it's very hard, I would say probably impossible, to articulate that to another person that I want to ride on this journey with me, right? If I asked you, let's do a quick example. If I asked you, Carlos, I know I'm putting you on the spot. Do you want to be married one day?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you think that you need? Give me like maybe your top three, if you can. What do you think are maybe the top three things you need from your wife in order to feel like you're gonna be, you might have a successful relationship?
For sure. Open honesty, for sure. Definitely trust, and I would definitely say exploration. That would be the main things like that. That's priorities for me. For sure.
Okay. Now, why does that matter? Thank you for sharing that. Why does that matter? Because if I'm sitting down across from you, right, and we're on a date, and somebody's like, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Like, if you don't have that answer back there, number one, they're probably not taking you that very seriously, because they're like, well, you don't even understand what you're looking for. So I don't even know why you're sitting here. You know, you're clearly just figuring it out, and that's fine. Just like we're all figuring out who we are.
Mm-hmm.
But when you want to go on these journeys with folks, you need to understand who you are and what you want. So again, that's why communication is important to me. And then on the side note, going back to what I was saying about when we're trying to give people the space to figure out who they are. And I'm trying my very, very best to not go on a soapbox here, but I feel like, I just feel like we living in this time, it's really, really difficult for people to just be real.
Mm-hmm.
We have this space where, especially again on online platforms, I think where people feel like they must portray a certain image that is attractive or appealing to the eye for men, women, children, whoever, but it's not necessarily telling the whole story, which we've touched on this before, and I posted clips about it this week, touching just on that. Making sure that when we are talking about what we're about and we're talking about who we are, like, let's make sure we're telling the whole story. So in order to tell the story, I got to know who I am. I got to know what I'm about. I think, to me, again, that's why communication is so valuable, because it touches every facet of our existence while we're here. Because our existence is not just us observing every single thing that we go through. It's sharing it back, right? Whether it's on a platform like this, whether it's on a podcast, whether it's making clips, whether it's going live. The purpose is we value as humans connection, and that connection is through communication, typically verbal, right? That's what I value. I know that I value that. I've learned throughout my life on my journey to self-discovery that I need that. I think I've had relationships not work because I didn't recognize how important that was to me, and I wasn't getting it. And then it caused things to unfold poorly. I've learned over the course of parenting so far that I value that, and I want my son to always feel open to communicate with me. I value that with my clients. I want them to never be afraid. And in that specific sphere, in mental health, I will say even more so, it's paramount to be your authentic self, and for us to give a client that space. Because the person is largely, a lot of times, going through that experience with you if you're the provider, if you're the clinician. And they're already second guessing themselves. They're already afraid.
Right.
They're like, if I say this, I don't know if he's gonna say I can't work with you anymore, or I don't subscribe to this. I'm like, listen, you can do whatever you want. Even if I disagree, I'm still gonna go on this journey with you, right? Because you're allowed the space and the freedom to learn how you see yourself, how you feel about certain things. I'm not gonna be another person to shut you down. And for a lot of brothers and sisters out there in these different spaces, going through their own experiences, I just think it's really important that I hope that I'm communicating this clearly. I want us to give people the space to make mistakes and grow and evolve, and stop shutting each other down while we're trying to figure out who we are, just because we bump our heads or we slip. That's gonna happen, especially talking about in your 20s. It's absolutely gonna happen. But let's not demonize each other because of that. Let's allow each other, okay, let's get some grace here. You made a mistake. I'm gonna challenge you. You made a mistake. But I'm gonna give you information that maybe you can go back and you can take some time and try to digest, and maybe you'll be different for in the future. Instead of, in your example, Carlos, I'm attacking you, and what did you say? I had to get defensive. That's what people do. Anything you want to add to that?
That's magical, sir. What can I say? You're dropping amazing gems there. I think you're making a really powerful point there, especially when we're helping someone else really uncover their true selves. And we, like you said, we really can't do that without us doing it first. Like, whether you're a parent, whether you're a therapist, whether you are like a friend, even. It's important for us to really take the time to uncover ourselves and, like, really honestly, like there's my brain works in fun ways. We're gonna bring it back to hip hop because
Yeah.
we talked about hip hop before, but I heard the song "Mask Off" by Future the other day. It's really
Okay.
hard for us
Oh
to take
yeah.
the mask off because a lot of us are really wearing this mask just to please whoever's around us. Like when I remember when I was like living in New Jersey 4 or 5 years ago, and I was working around like really wealthy Caucasian people.
Hmm.
I had to really not be myself. I really had to like put on this facade, kind of just act in a certain way that I thought would make them happy.
Yeah.
And what that ended up doing, and I know that happens to a lot of black and brown people, is that it drains you. It really is really incredibly draining. It's not empowering. It's not, you don't really feel good. You really don't.
Hmm.
Not while doing it, not after. And especially when you know you got to go do it, it's not good. It really, it doesn't feel good. Is what I'm trying to say. And even to honestly to use a practical example, because like you said, we're gonna be sharing some stories. Something that I struggle with myself, just like yourself. I grew up with short hair always, my entire life. I grew up like probably mine was like a two.
Okay.
I finessed it, but yeah, and even to like if you're American, if you're watching this, I grew up in the Dominican Republic. If you grew your hair out, they'll send you home and tell you to come back. Like at school, if you go to school and you grow your hair out, they'll tell you to go home, cut it. Otherwise, they're not let you in school. If you were to
Wow.
do like, yeah, it was literally like it was you had to have short hair as a man. So that's what I grew up around. So when I first
Hmm.
came to the US and I started growing my curls out, just because I thought they looked good. I was like, I like my curls. And I
Right.
came
Right.
back, everyone was like, "Oh, you're a rebel." I'm like, "I'm 12 years old. Like, what kind of rebel am I really?" But that's the thing. Like, and for the longest, I still like, even though I had curls, like it was like pretty short. And I think it was in 2020 when the barbershops closed down, that I had like this like really in-depth conversation with myself where I was like, "Hey, like." Because I had a thing, I could cut it all, I could cut it myself and like just
Hmm.
keep it going. But I kind of asked myself like, why do I want to cut it? Like, what do I want? And I remember thinking like, oh, actually, I want to grow it. I never seen it, I never experienced it. I want to see how it is.
Hmm.
And I went back to my values. I'm like, what do I value? I remember I talked to myself and remember I value acting from love, not from fear. And especially being a black man in America, I remember that one of the fears that I had, because it wasn't anymore about, oh, is society going to accept me for having long hair? Am I going to be able to like go to school or any of that? Like that wasn't a fear of mine anymore.
Right.
But I remember having the thought, okay, but what are police officers going to think when they see me and I have long hair and I have braids or whatever it might be? Like I
Hmm.
really don't want to get shot. Honestly, just to keep it 100, to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
like I was scared. I was like, I don't want that. Like I'm trying to get my master's right now. The last thing I need is to like mess it all up by driving somewhere and getting shot for my
Hmm.
hair. Basically,
Yeah.
but I remember making a decision like, hey, like I'm going to act out of love regardless, and I'm going to embrace who I am, and I'm going to embrace my hair, I'm going to embrace my curls, and I'm just going to grow it out. And I made a decision out of love because I value love more than I value fear because I really don't value fear at all. I think not that I don't value it. I see a value in fear in many situations, but that's not when it comes to decision making. I like to use
Right.
love. I used to make sure that that's what was dictating my decisions rather than fear.
Yeah.
So I remember at first it was tough for me because I like that you have the awkward stage where your hair kind of looks wild when you first grow it, and like you don't know
Yeah.
how to take care of it. You don't know how to like give it some love. You don't know how to like
Hmm.
style it and all that stuff. So for me, it was challenging really to not cut it off like 6 months in and just being like, okay, I think I'm done now. And really embracing like, hey, no, like my hair is beautiful. Like
Yeah.
I have like, I think this is amazing. The fact that like the black that's coming from my grandpa is coming through me and like actually like have this beautiful like African hair. Like I'm gonna embrace it.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of me really doing a lot of inner work to really embrace that. to really understand, like, hey, you are beautiful just the way that you are. Like everything that you are beautiful, you're amazing, you're empowering just the way that you are. It took a lot. Again, to keep it vulnerable here, because that's what we're here for. It took some crying, even. Like I had to like really sit with myself and kind of realize how I wasn't embracing myself. I
Yeah.
saw a lot of my people like kind of perming their hair, doing all that stuff, and I didn't feel like that was what I wanted to do, just
Hmm.
to fit in, just to fit in. And eventually, like 2 years later, like my hair is longer than it's ever been, and I love it. I think it's one of the best things I've done. It's taught me so much about how to take care of it. It's taught me so much about hair. Taught me so much about
Oh
my
yeah.
own identity, embracing it. Because I was a little bit like before, it was hard to kind of tell what I was. You can say that I might be Indian. You can say that I might be different things. But once you got that afro going, like
A
it's
little
hard
clear.
for people. Like, yeah, it's a lot more clear. Okay, you're Caribbean, you're black, you're somewhere around that area. And I started getting compliments from people like, hey, I love your hair, like I love your curls, all of the time.
Hmm.
And that reassurance also like really like cemented the fact that like, hey, not that to say that I feel it that feeling of fear is invalid, but that feeling of fear was unhelpful. Um,
Hmm.
Definitely valid, especially because I was experiencing it from my perspective and from my own experience.
Hmm.
So I made sure that I validated myself for that. But I realized that that wasn't helping me really, like just basically come out of my shell. Really, like I said, take that mask off and just be me. If that makes sense.
No, it absolutely makes sense, and I appreciate you for sharing that. I mean, I think it's to me, I think it's maybe a more common story than we think.
Mm,
It's just that again that maybe we don't talk about it enough. Because I had a very similar experience that you just outlined. It just took
mm,
me it took me quite a few years later because I was very much ingrained with that mentality of again, even if you talk about like gender roles, like men are to have short hair, women are allowed to have longer hair.
mm,
So it was kind of learning to break that mold. I will honestly say, and hopefully any brothers who are watching may agree. I will say for me, one thing that definitely bolstered my confidence as a Black American was when Black Panther came out.
oh,
Like
yeah,
that was a moment that I remember,
totally.
like immense pride,
Mm,
like immense pride, and normally I think that there's this balance between pride and a bit of shame. That
mm,
this is a dynamic that we're trying to constantly battle with, because that's the history that we get taught in this country.
right.
A lot of it is a lot about shame, and so I think that was like a moment where it just kind of thrusted us forward, and it was like this is this is the pride that you should feel because this is where we come from. This is the heritage. Obviously, it's a fictional country, but it's representing a greater diaspora, right? That we're from. And so I remember that kind of moment. It was like, yeah, celebrating hair, celebrating the textiles, the clothing, right? All of that. So beautiful moment. And I had already started growing my hair at that time, but it just helped like reinstill some more confidence for me at that time. I was like, yeah, I should embrace this because, like you said, same thing. I hadn't really done it before, and I definitely didn't know what I was doing. I had to ask cousins and some lady friends I had, and watch a lot of YouTube videos from women about curly hair and like how they deal with that. Just trying to learn. Thankfully, there's YouTube now, so I try
Shout
to
out
learn,
to
try to learn a lot about that. But yeah, that just the concept of like again, what's acceptable, what's not. I remember when I first gauged my ears, I was my tias were first like, that's not Christ-like, essentially.
you.
And or when I got a couple of tattoos, they're like, that's you're not doing right by your body. And I'm like,
Mm,
yeah, but my stuff represents me. My
mm,
my tattoos actually are representing my family. They're all symbolic. And so I think it takes time to get comfortable enough to be able to express that, right? Why do you have what you have on? Why are you wearing that do-rag? What's underneath that hair? Why are you growing your hair in that way? Because it all represents aspects of who I believe that I am and the life I'm trying to live, right? I had to get comfortable even braiding my hair and feeling like you said, am I making myself more of a target? Because people are going to automatically put me in this box, and then maybe they're going to think I'm more threatening because I have braids on or because I have a do-rag on, and they think, is he a hoodlum?
mm,
No, I'm just a person. You may not know, and that's okay. I have no problem in educating you if you don't understand what these things are for, but
yep,
don't mischaracterize me and think that I'm somehow a threat now.
right.
All of these complicated, convoluted issues all make up this journey to discovering us, which is how we figure out what is our authentic self. It takes all of these discussions that we're laying out, and we were talking about hair a second ago.
Right.
But it takes all of these different attributes to neatly eventually package it together and say, this is me. This is who I am presenting to the world. I don't think if I had really gone on this journey and really started to fully understand and appreciate who I am in all aspects of me, I wouldn't even feel confident talking to you on here right now. Because I might be questioning myself, like, oh, should I have worn that? Should I maybe not had my hair in braids? Maybe I should have went like this. Because I'm worried about are people going to misunderstand who I am? But I feel very confident at 35. This is me. Now I can still evolve. I can still grow, as you can, as anybody else who's listening and watching can. But to me, we just got to give each other the space to do that and stop making it seem like everybody at like 19 or 20, even though we know we all made mistakes at that time, we act like we forgot that you're going to say things maybe you didn't mean. You might say something insensitive. You might misidentify somebody. I don't think everything is out of being malicious. I think it's part of us learning these new dynamics, these rules, right? These unwritten societal rules and norms that are constantly changing, especially in the social media era. And we're trying to learn how to navigate them, maybe while still being respectful to other people, but understanding that we are still formulating our own opinions about the world in the way that we see it.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree. I feel like it especially as we're really understanding our identity, so many of us are, I think the word that comes to mind is attached to who do we think that we have to be or who we should be, rather than who we are. I guess bringing it back to the acceptance, because I feel like really even crafting our identity and really understanding who we are needs both acceptance and detachment from the things that we think we must be, the things that we think that we should be to please whoever is outside of us. When in reality, like we're ignoring so many important parts of ourselves that is not helping us really live at ease, live a life of love, like really live stress-free about what people might think. Because I even for this call, like I'm wearing a do-rag, I was like, oh, I gotta do my hair and everything. I was like, yeah, like it's all good. Like honestly, like it's Saturday, I'm not gonna be wearing it all day. Like I'm cleaning around the house and stuff, so I'm chilling.
That's okay.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it really is about like really being detached from what people might think, or even being detached from those ideas about identity. And detachment, I don't mean like being separated from it. I really just mean being open to understanding that we do change as people. We might be encountering information that's new. We might meet someone who behaves or dresses in a way that we look up to. We might want to like start taking up on those habits or traits from that person, especially if we think they're going to serve us. But I feel like, especially in today's society, we're so attached to who we think that we are that we're not really taking the time to discover who we really are deeply. And again, I feel like that comes back to that inner work, that shadow work, that really sitting down with ourselves, sitting down with the people that we trust, and having those deep conversations and really asking ourselves really tough questions. I remember, I think it was like a couple of months ago, I love journal prompts, and I came across this journal prompt that took me some time to like really sit down and like write it down. Again, it was a challenge, but it was not a hard question though. It really is, what do I want? Was the question. And that's something that we think about all the time, because people ask you, what do you want? Constantly. But yeah, it's true. But it's very different than when you're sitting down with your thoughts by yourself in a quiet place. I like to play some chill, non-lyrical music, just like really just to set the ambience.
Some lo-fi maybe.
You know, lo-fi. A couple binaural beats in there. But really sitting down with ourselves and like really just having that question on the top of the page and without judgment, without fear, without doubt, just putting down on paper what's actually going through our minds. is that we can, a lot of us are so attached to things that we think we want or even need, that when we start putting them down, you can really create that detachment and look and, okay, actually, that's not really that important to me. That's not something that I will consider a priority. Or,
Mm-hmm.
wow, that's like 3 times on my list. That really matters. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm here. I might even be not embracing that part of myself. Like, and
Yeah.
that's important. So I think that that inner work, it's so crucial, and really asking yourself those tougher questions, not just like passingly, just like, oh yeah, I think I want this, or and then just moving on. Like really sitting down and taking that time to ask yourself those questions. And even better, like if you have friends, like I personally like to go into nature and camping with my friends, where we have no phones and we sit around the fire and we really ask ourselves and like ask each other, and create that open, judgment-free space, so we can um, basically heal and really be honest,
Mm-hmm.
judgment-free, and discover things that they might ask you something that you never thought about. And
Yeah.
you're out there in nature with silence and time. Like you're just gonna sit there and think about it, and however much time you need to like really discover that, it's okay. But I think
Mm-hmm.
really dedicating those times to really diving deep, it's is really important to really get to know ourselves a little bit better, and really,
Mm-hmm.
really get to know what we value most in life. Whether it is, like you said, relationship, whether it is the way that we dress, whether it is the environment, whether it is um, where we live, even. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's important. I think it's really important. And I say I think because most people might disagree with me, but I think that that's not important. But I think it's important for us to take that time to really ask ourselves those questions and answer them truthfully, openly, without any fear about what other people might think or might say. And honestly, eventually, you might even get to the point like we are, where I could talk about anything that I wrote in my journal. I don't care.
Right.
I,
Right. Yeah. You
I'm
get.
moving on.
You're being honest. You're being
Yeah,
honest.
I'm sticking to my values. Like I
Absolutely.
value honesty. Yeah.
It's important. No, I appreciate your honesty. I actually
Mhm.
want to make sure I tackle something because I feel like this is important. I haven't posted about it yet, but while we were talking, I was thinking about there's an episode I haven't dropped yet, but I want to touch on this.
I'm excited.
Especially when it comes to, hopefully you'll appreciate where I'm about to go. When it comes to acceptance of self, particularly when it comes to those of us that come from mixed race or multicultural backgrounds.
Mm.
I had a really good conversation with this young lady, yeah, some weeks ago. I know this isn't for everybody, but hopefully you will still appreciate, maybe you know somebody who might be dealing with this. But for those that aren't in the United States, in America for a long time, there wasn't necessarily, I would say, a celebration to a certain degree of people from families that are not all one same ethnicity. And it's difficult because, and I'm speaking as somebody who comes from that, it's difficult because that's a huge part of trying to figure out who you are, right? When you're talking about this authentic self. That's why I had to touch on this. Sometimes you're growing up in different environments. I'm going to use myself in reference to these stories I'm going to give. When you're trying to figure out who you are, the environments that you're in obviously will shape a large part of that. So for example, I spent time with both halves of my family, so my Black side and my Latino side, but then I also went to schools with a lot of white kids. And so naturally, I was quite conflicted for a long period of time. I thought that I needed to try to embrace or embody aspects of whiteness in terms of my dress, my speech, things like that, because I felt like that would help me assimilate and fit in better. Look less threatening, not necessarily I was thinking about that, but just definitely fitting in more.
Right.
Because that's all I thought was important. That's all I thought I valued at that time. But as I got older, I started to intentionally surround myself with people who were like me, meaning their families were not from the same background. And the reason why I knew that I did that, especially around high school time, was because I knew that they had similar challenges and questions that I did, right? Because some of them, mom and dad didn't even speak the same language. So how they got together was amazing. So you're trying to understand how these different stories even unfold.
Right.
And And for me, it became more important to allow myself to be around people like that, because it helped me better understand that, like, it's okay that I don't fully live in one space. I don't fully live in my Black side of my family, my Latino side of my family, or trying to be around more white people in general. It's okay to embrace all aspects of that, and whatever that may be for you and your lifestyle. But when you're growing up, you don't necessarily always feel like that. You know, for anybody who maybe has had this experience, you might feel like less than. You might feel like you get, you know, you hear certain comments that make you feel a little more like an outcast in these different spaces because you don't fit. And it took me personally, it took me a long time to fully appreciate all those aspects of who I am. It really did. Because I knew there was moments where I was like, man, and I'm in this space, some people celebrate me. Some people look at me like I'm kind of like an other. Some people look at me maybe like I'm less than. And I had to learn to be okay with all of that. You know, that's everybody's perception, right? Even if it's friends, family, or just society. But I had to learn that that was okay. You're allowed to have your opinion. Those of you on the internet, anybody looking here watching, right? You're allowed to have your opinion of me, and I don't care. I know my opinion of me. I know what journey I've come to figure out who I am and what I value and what's important to me and my impact I want to create in the world. So I don't need external validation. But for a long time, when I was learning and I was growing, it was very confusing. It was very challenging to figure those things out. And so I have immense empathy for those of us, especially that come from those backgrounds, not just those, but especially those, because it's a little bit more challenging, right? If your family all comes from the same place, it is fundamentally easier. Probably speak the same language, everybody eats the same food, you understand the same cultural traditions, norms, and values. It's a lot easier. When you're trying to blend, it is way harder. And I'll take it one little step further. When you have people in your family, that, especially in America, that don't look the same, that makes it even more confusing. My sister is a much more fair-skinned version of me. So some people who aren't used to seeing family members not all be the same shade, they're confused. You know, they look, they're like, how are y'all related? Or they think it's a joke. And I'm like, no, that's my blood sister. Like, we got the same parents.
Yeah.
They don't understand basic biology with phenotypes and stuff like that. So I get it.
It's too complicated. It's too complicated.
Yeah. But I'm like, but that happens, right? That's natural. But I say all that because, you know, not to stick to the superficial. I'm trying to go deep here, but also acknowledge that some people get caught up on the superficial stuff. Again, even with colorism. Some parts of the world, I just came back from Asia. I know over there in a lot of those places, they love, not everybody, but many of them, they value very fair-skinned women. So they'll go to extremes of covering themselves so that because it's being seen as more beautiful, right? And we know over here, a lot of us, even in the African-American community, in the Black diaspora, in the Latino community, we value European-esque features. Not because we don't value us, it's because we were taught to value that more than us. Right? So it's like hard to, you know, we're grappling with that. Now I think we're trying to promote more of who we really are, our real hair, you know, our real shapes, stuff like that. But it takes time, because for a long time we were held to this standard and we couldn't match it because we don't look like that. So then we might feel less than. So again, I know this is it's a long-winded response, but I'm trying to tackle a lot of nuance that comes with trying to figure out who you are, accepting who you are, and understanding that even though we're all different in different ways, I think that we're all allowed the space to discover who we are, what we want, what we value, and hopefully continue to give space to those while they're trying to figure that out for themselves.
I love it. Honestly, like I'm listening to you speak right now. I'm thinking of a paradigm that I have to break myself, of thinking that you can just be that. No, you can be multiple things. And most of us, especially if you're mixed, especially if you have multiple I think identities within you, like you are multiple things, and that's okay for you to be those things. I remember you can be more than just that. Like, you really can be. So just if you're watching this and you are mixed race, if you are multicultural, you can be more than just saying. But for like again to keep it even to be real, I believe it was like 4 or 5 years ago when I first moved to Arizona. I remember I worked at a school, and it was very diverse and everything like that. There was like a decent amount of black people, Latinos, whites, a little bit of everything. And I remember this coworker who she is like dark skinned black. She literally came up to me like during pickup, like I was just hanging out, and she's like, "Hey, Carlos, you're not black," and I was just like, I was like, okay, like out of nowhere, I'm like, okay. But I remember for a couple of months I sat with that, and I was like, I'm like, nah, but I got pulled over at a white town that I lived in New Jersey, literally for going a mile over the speed limit after a police officer saw me driving down the street because there was no black people in the town, and it was just me with some brothers there. So I remember, like, he saw me, was going 1 mile over the speed limit. He went and stopped me, and when he stopped me and actually spoke to me, he realized that I actually, like, I guess I speak white or something. I don't know. But overall, he was like, "Oh no, you're good." But I saw how in the mirror there was a very different approach when he thought of he knew what I was, and then he actually spoke to me. There was a massive shift, and he let me go without a ticket. Like I was fine, of course. But I felt very black at that time. I felt very black, and I was like, okay, this is how he feels. Like I'm literally just getting out of work, like it's late or whatever, but I am literally just getting out of work on my way home, being me, literally sticking. Like I remember being very intentional about following the speed limit, but going a mile over, like it really is just like like a little bit. It's really like it's really hard to keep it at that speed or whatever. But it took me some time to really realize that, and especially taking whenever I meet like even Mexican people, a lot of the time they're like, "Oh, like yeah, you're black," because they see my hair and they don't. I have my best friend actually. He's never met a black person ever before he moved to the United States. So when he first came here, he was like, yeah, like honestly, I'd never seen people with hair like yours. I've never seen people with even skin tones like yours. He's very fair skinned himself. So he after experiencing so many times where I was immediately identified as someone, like by all the people, as someone who was black, and also acknowledging the fact that in my blood I have a lot of black blood in there, like literally from my family members, from my grandparents. Like my mom is like really dark skinned herself, and just like kind of being thrown off by it, and kind of just when I remember when I first heard that, I'm like, wait, so I can just be Latino? Okay, like I guess that's what she was trying to say or something like that. I don't know. We didn't have a conversation. She just said that and walked away. So I in my mind, I'm like, that's weird. So I guess I can just be that. But now I understand. And luckily, really soon after that, after doing some inner digging, that I can be more than just the Latino guy. I can also be black, and I could also appreciate white culture as well. I can also appreciate Asian culture as well. And really realizing that we can be more than just that is my point. Like really embracing that fact, especially if you're mixed, and even if you're not mixed. Like I have some friends who are fully white, and they're Irish and Italian, and they might be, and that's, you can be more than one thing and really embrace all parts of you. That's one of the main reasons I wanted to put this together, and I really break down the fact that we can be multiple things, and a lot of the paradigms that many of us live by, they're not really helping us be us. They're not really helping us live a life of freedom, truly. Like in a land of freedom in America, with an American flag waving at right outside, I can tell you that honestly, like freedom requires, or I wouldn't say require, but it's empowered through us being our true authentic selves, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And I feel like by us creating this separation or this categories or putting people into certain buckets, we're not really helping our species evolved, and we're not really expanding that love that we should all be sharing with each other. Um, yeah, but that's just how I see it. Yeah, that's
No,
just
no,
how I see
no,
it. Yeah.
no. It's good points, man. I mean, I like to acknowledge, all parts of our experience, and I appreciate you for sharing as well. I mean, I talk about my hurtful experiences also, not because I think it's all of our lived experience, or again, like everything is sad, everything is negative. No, but we got to recognize the totality of what we go through, right? Like it is a different lived experience. Even with what you were touching on, like I was thinking for a moment when you were explaining, even like being pulled over. I will share this. I will share this really quick story going back to. I mean, my sister looked very different, and my son actually looks a little bit different, more different than me. Because again, these are things that people may not hear or they may not know. So my son's mother's family lives in like this rural part of Florida, and one time my sister was driving. This was years ago, many years ago. He was a baby, but my sister was driving, and we were driving to drop him back off, and we got pulled over randomly. I was in the backseat, my sister was driving. And so we got pulled over, obviously no idea why. And we come to find out that some woman, I guess, that was driving thought perhaps, and I'm not making this up, they thought that I was perhaps trying to kidnap my sister and my son because I was in the back seat, in the way that I was kind of leaning forward. I was basically leaning forward, like holding him and then like making sure my sister knew where to go. Somebody was threatened by that. I don't know why. So we got pulled over. That's what the police told us. And not even making a joke, because I wasn't driving. I didn't have my identification because I was not driving, and I had no intention on driving. My sister was driving. But they didn't believe that we were related. Right? So they pulled my sister out of the car, and they asked her like 5 different times, because they thought she might have been scared. They're like, how do you know this person? And she's told them every way possible that like we're related. And they didn't believe her. Finally they did, but it took them a while. And I say that because those are small examples. Did anything significantly bad happen? No, nobody got shot, nobody got arrested. It was inconvenient, it was highly prejudicial, because again, it's like this idea that like, you can't, if you don't look the same, you can't be related.
Right.
Or that you're inherently looking evil or threatening because, I'm much darker than my sister is. And so it was one of those examples that I kind of always remembered. It keeps me grounded, right? That everybody isn't open-minded. Some people are very stuck in their way of seeing the world. As you said earlier, they're attached to their worldview, very much so. And I understand that, and I appreciate that. Like I respect a racist person or a prejudicial person. I respect you for being open and candid about how you feel, because at least I know where you are, right? It's much harder if you're trying to like walk the fence and you're like, sometimes you talk this way, but then sometimes no. I prefer if you just be you. If this is who you are, please be you all the time.
Yeah,
so I know how to gauge you. You know what I mean? Because that's how I am. I'm truly like, I will listen to anybody talk about virtually anything.
Yep.
Even if it seems hateful, even if it's discriminatory, because I just want to understand why you think the way that you do. I don't agree with you, but I just want to understand. But I say those as examples because to me, all of those are experiences that we may go through that shape your perception of yourself and of your reality. Because I could have took that so many ways, I could have took that and I could have let it beat me up and said, oh man, see, this is just another reason why I hate myself, because only we go through these types of experiences. Only we get profiled in this way. Why do you think I'm getting pulled out of this car? I could have easily taken it like that and then just, beat myself down and felt bad about who I am. But I didn't do that. I just understand that inherently there are experiences, not always. I'm not a cop hater. I have many cops in my family.
Yep.
I'm just saying there's experiences that we may have that might make it more difficult for some of us based on how we look and how we appear. But I love and accept who I am so much that it overpowers whatever somebody else might try to portray to me or trying to tell me who I am. So going back to, I say that story because I'm trying to go back to the central point. If I don't discover who I am, if I don't learn who I am and what I'm about and what I value and what I want my impact to be in this world while I'm alive, my perception of myself could be shaped, wildly skewed, because I'm taking it all in from you, right? If you keep telling me I'm less than or my people are less than, I might believe you at some point. Like, yes, sir, I am subservient to you.
Right.
You know, I might think that. And I don't, of course, want to encourage anybody to, or same for like women. I don't want women to think that they're subservient to us, because I don't believe in that either. But it's understanding that if I don't give myself the space, if we don't give each other the space to grow and evolve, then it's hard when you maybe have encounters like that. It's hard to like maintain your integrity. It might be hard to maintain your sense of identity, because you might feel like, man, if I don't do this, man, they're gonna treat me badly, or they don't accept me because of my hairstyle. So let me perm my hair, let me cut my hair. Just like with, I know some young men in schools with that want to rock dreads, right? Some black men that want to rock dreads. In some places, you know, it was against the rules. I don't fully remember why. I think it was something like it's unkempt, something like that. And it's like, no, they're just being who they naturally are. And they may not have dreads forever, but while they want to have it, let them.
Right.
If they want to dress like this, as long as it's not harming anyone or it's not a huge distraction, especially in school,
Right.
then let them. They're just being who they are. And so, again, I know this is a very, very complex issue. We're talking about facets of what it is to figure out who you are, to discover who you are, some effects, side effects, or consequences that we might deal with while we're trying to figure out who we are. But I still think we all need the space to be allowed to grow. That's always going to be my point throughout this conversation.
I love it. I think you make such an amazing point there. That of the importance of us really dedicating that time to really discover ourselves, to really discover what matters to us, what we value, how we see ourselves, like how we identify as ourselves. I think that's such an amazing point that you make in there, because like you said, when you do know who you are, like I could have just 100% let my friend tell me, oh, you're not black, and I'm like, okay, then just believe her, or kind of embrace that. But since I'm so confident in who I know I am, I can just like, oh, well, thank you for your opinion. But I know who I am.
Sure.
But I know who I am. So it's really important for us to really take that time and really figure out who we are, and even to go a little bit further, who we want to be. Because we might be something right now that, or we might have been something for a while that, as you sit down and go over your values, you're like, hey, like I'm not actually living up to my values. And you might want to shift. You might want to make a change. You might want to evolve in some way or another. So I think the best way to do that is it's through the ways that we talked about through this call, really through really accepting where we are right now, who we are, even accepting who we have been. Because let's be honest, there's nothing we can do about that. Like it's already working.
It's happened.
It's happened. But then utilizing that information, and then we can start actually being a little more intentional about who we want to become, what kind of person do we want to be in this world, what kind of impact do we want to make later on. And again, I mentioned this in past talks. No one knows what's going to happen in an hour from now. No billionaire, no scientist, no spiritual person. No one knows what's going to happen an hour from now. No one knows what's going to happen a year from now, of course. We can guess, we can prepare for different scenarios. But we do have the power and I wouldn't even say ability, because I feel like it would take some skill, but we do have the opportunity to really dive within ourselves to figure out who we want to become and what kind of person we want to be in this world. And I think that by doing that, we do in turn make the world a better place, because a lot of the time when we do dive into within ourselves and start digging into who we truly are, we start really noticing all those similarities with other people that we thought were differences. Many of the times we tend to get caught up into like, oh, people are so different, and I'm so different from that person, I'm so different from that person, our skin color is different, our values are different, whatever. And many of the times it's very superficial. once we start
Oh
going a
yeah,
little bit deeper, we start feeling that connection. We start realizing that we really are more alike than we are different. That's really what I
absolutely.
got my tattoo, like the only tattoo I got. And it's really just a reminder that we really are like, how can we be special when we're made of the same ingredients? It's basically the
Big
intention.
big facts.
Like, we,
You're absolutely right, man. I mean,
yeah,
I would add one thing in there real quick. Because you talk about the superficial, and you know it has to be superficial. You can only make that argument on a superficial basis. Because if you
yes.
study any type of biology, to your point you're making right now, like 99% of us are the same.
Like you're almost identical.
Like it's exactly the same. So
Yeah.
we argue about a very very tiny percentage. But please continue your point.
No, 100. No, that's a fact. Right now, I hear you saying that, and I remember I watched this. I don't know if you've seen Rick and Morty, like that show.
Yeah, I used to watch that show for sure.
It's hilarious. It's hilarious. There's an episode where they go to a different planet, and there's a race war happening.
Oh
And
yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
it's amazing. They're literally identical. Like the two races are identical, but I think they have like different shaped. What's it, nipples or something? I don't know. It was like nipples over ears or something. One was a square, the other was a triangle, and it
Yeah.
was like little single difference. And it was literally created a worldwide race war about
Yeah.
something that us coming in as like outsiders. That's what I think about all the time. Like if aliens were to come and see us, and they're like, "Wait, you say you guys are different?" I see the same. Like, I don't, like, but we're
It's
so
true.
caught up in those minutia that doesn't really help us and doesn't
Hmm.
really like. And when I say help us, I mean like help this species continue to like evolve
Of
and grow.
course. Of
That's what I
course.
mean by help, of course.
Yeah,
But
man.
I think that it's so important for us to really take a step back, and even more important, take a step in, and really start noticing how we're more alike to our brothers and sisters than we really think we are. Because it might be
Absolutely.
media, it might be some books that we read, it might even be something that we learned through our family saying that think that we are different. But we really are not. We really are a lot more alike. A lot of the feelings that we have, a lot of the insecurities that we might have, a lot of the even thoughts that we have, many of the
Mhm.
times are the same as a lot of people on this planet.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I want to build on what you're saying too, because I think that's also very important. I try very hard in my life to be an example of recognizing the differences that we do have in terms of like cultural differences. And again, particularly this is unique to America. So if you're not in America, you might not fully appreciate this. But I do believe in celebrating those cultural differences that we have in terms of, in a sense of empowerment and just kind of learning your heritage, right? Not at the point of, I hate you because you are not like me. I don't support that. I'm talking about in terms of an importance of my history, my heritage, and helps shape my worldview a bit, right? But to your point, we want to celebrate all people because we recognize that we are fundamentally much more similar than we are different, right? On a much more, even if you got on a microscopic scale. But I did want to make a point about my general worldview in terms of something, again, practical that we can all always do. Very difficult at times, but I think it leads us to be a bit more inquisitive than judgmental, is to try to be more curious. You know, when it comes to, when you were talking about, we were talking about different cultural backgrounds, right? Again, I was in Asia, so that's different than my lived experience. They have different cultural values over there than we may have in America, and even the subcultures that we have within America. But there's certain things that are very much the same. People want to have good lives. A lot of people want to build families. They want to have children. Parents want their children to do better than they did. There's so many commonalities because we understand we're the same people. It's just packaged a little different. Maybe we eat different food. Maybe our language is a little different. Maybe we have some traditions that are different, right? But outside of that, everything else is virtually the same. We just package it in a different format. So don't think that, you know, like you're so special. It's just there are some variations, and I do believe in celebrating them. But don't make it make you think that you're so isolated and you're so unique that you're not a part of the same background that all the rest of us are from. And I think that if we are a bit more on the curious side and we ask more questions, number one, it will be easier for us to allow us to go on this journey of self-discovery. It will allow others to, Because instead of judging them for presenting in a way that we don't understand, which is okay, I will ask questions instead of shame. Instead of saying, oh, you're weird because you're wearing this dress right now. As a man, I might say, why are you wearing that dress right now? What does that do for you? Or how did you come to a place of understanding that you felt that that's something that you wanted to do? It's not something that I would do, but I'd like to understand why you do it. Because, for example, we know Scottish people may wear them, and Celt and Irish people, they might wear those. It's a cultural thing. Some people might be like, oh yeah, I would never do that. Okay, that's fine. But I think it's important just to understand, if we ask more of those types of questions, maybe we would be more understanding of one another. Maybe we would allow people to figure out who they are, because we wouldn't shame them or make them feel bad as they're trying to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And then we as a society could maybe have a better harmony, right? That's a piece that I feel like we miss. We're so quick to judge. We love making these snap judgments, particularly online. And we don't know the whole story. We don't have even 50%, 75% of the context, right? Because you just listen to about 10, 15 seconds of something and you're like, yes, this is what it must be. And we're talking about humans and their perspective and their lived experience. So let's be maybe a bit more curious about what people go through, about ourselves and what we've gone through, and do our work, as Carlos has said, so that maybe we can be more understanding of others and give them the space to figure out who they are, just like we want in return.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We're gonna leave it right there. I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, that's it. That's that. Yeah, honestly, if you take anything from this call, what RJ just said, that's the gem. That's what this is all about. That's the importance of us really taking the time to discover our true authentic self. It's so we can have a better world. It does help, and it gives and allow us to really have that compassion to allow others to discover and embrace their true authentic self as well.
Yes.
So thank you, RJ. Is there anything else you want to add? I was like, yeah, like that's it. Like, yeah,
no, man. No, when we get going, sometimes these things just start rolling.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
no, I'm glad we're here as always. I appreciate everybody who's listening and who's watching. I hope that, if you didn't get a chance to catch the whole thing, come back and rewatch it. Give us questions, shoot them to myself or Carlos, so that we can make sure we address them. Keep up the engagement because it helps, because we're going to keep doing these. And of course, I like I mentioned earlier, there will be an episode. I don't know when yet, but I will be dropping one in the near future talking about what I was saying earlier about the dynamics where your families come from two different cultures and you're trying to learn how to navigate it. So if you want to hear stuff like that, go check out my page. I'll be posting that in probably the next few weeks.
Definitely. I'm definitely going to be on the lookout for that for sure. I'm excited for that. That sounds like a fire talk. That sounds like a fire talk. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone listening. And thank you for everyone that actually watched the recording of this, taking the time to really dive into these necessary conversations and giving us your attention and your time, which are the most valuable assets that we have. So thank you. And like RJ said, we have a lot more of these coming. We're honestly most likely going to have a couple more people joining us as well. And making these this might go a little bit long, but it's all good. I feel these conversations are necessary, so we'll make it work and we'll make it happen. At the end of the day, this is bigger than us. This is really it's really just about adding value to our community and making these conversations more of a norm. We want especially Black and brown men to understand that being vulnerable, sharing, having mental health conversations, really seeking help, a lot of the things that we talk about, it's okay. It is the norm, and it's something that we need to do more often. So thank you. Feel free to share this with someone you think will find value in this as well. And definitely, if you have any comments or questions, drop them in the comments below of the recording, or send us a message directly, and we'll definitely help however we can. So yeah, thank you so much, guys. Have a wonderful rest of the day. And take care, brother.
Yeah, man. Peace out, guys.